Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
I'm doing fine, ready and raring to go.
All right.
Solve the problems of the world.
Of course.
So, I want to talk today about what's going on in Syria, because there's some pretty good news coming out. But before I do that, I want to mention something else that was in the news that caught my attention, because I think most people have heard now that we're making some progress, with our fingers crossed, with North Korea, and Kim has agreed to send some of the bodies back from the Korean War. What a sad thing to deal with, especially since I remember very well the beginning of the Korean War in June of 1950, and that went on for 3 years. But the whole thing is I remember even back then, but more so over the years, that it was a UN war. We got, not from the Congress, we got authority to go in, and it was a police action, and all the lies that we started. But I want to show a picture of what has happened, because Kim has agreed to send some of these bodies back. He has sent these coffins back, but they're not draped in the American flag. They're draped in the UN flag.
Wow.
And I thought, how sad. The whole story is sad. The war is so sad. But we went there because of the UN, and I heard some commentators say, well, it was appropriate. It was a UN war, so I guess this is okay. Not that I'm super gung-ho about flags and all, but I'm not exactly, I'm sort of turned off with the UN flag, because it's the opposite of national sovereignty or individual sovereignty and local control. But that to me is rather sad, but hopefully the whole effort will be positive, and that they can keep moving in a direction of dealing with North Korea, and that we can have more peaceful relationships. So I think that symbolically is what people are hoping for, because that has existed as a thorn in many people's side, the fact that the bodies were never returned, but there was never a peace treaty either.
Yeah, and also it puts the point that the UN was formed to be a peacekeeping organization, or a peacemaking organization.
The first thing I did is start a war.
Yeah, exactly. The only tidbit that I would have, and I'm working on this for an update for our subscribers, Ron Paul Institute subscribers, and you can subscribe by going to our page, ronpaulinstitute.org. But I'm doing a little piece on the Facebook issue. I think it's so important. Facebook is rushing to silence, to get rid of Facebook pages that they don't like. Yeah. And Matt Taibbi, who we've known through the years, he writes now for Rolling Stone, he's a pretty good guy, especially when it comes to this kind of thing. He has a piece out about Facebook censorship, and he's no fan of someone like an Alex Jones, right? He's coming a bit more from the left, but he says this is dangerous because Facebook is becoming the de facto publisher. And here's a quote that he had: "People who know nothing about journalism or the news business have become the de facto editors of the earth, determining what you see and don't see." And that is disturbing. Earlier this week, Facebook announced that it had discovered some inauthentic sites and was getting rid of them, and it's got to be the Russians. But Taibbi makes a very good point, which I've made and we've made before, and we're going to make at our conference. Who does Facebook rely on? They're not journalists. I mean, they're not publishers. Who do they rely on to determine what's authentic and what's not? They rely on the Atlantic Council, which is a pro-war organization funded by NATO, funded by the Pentagon, funded by governments. Those are the people that they turn to say, is this authentic or not? It's no surprise that Ron Paul Institute postings, our anti-war postings on Facebook, I'm sure that Atlantic Council is saying not authentic, which is why our reach is going so far down. So this is an unfolding thing, and I think it's going to be in the news for a while, Dr. Paul.
Yes, and when you mention NATO, we have to assume that a bunch of that money is U.S. too, plus the U.S. Pentagon money that goes in. Now, on what's going on in Syria is rather good. It looks like the war is winding down. There's, I guess, at Idlib that they have won more battle, but it might not even be a big battle. They may just decide not to fight, because I think they know they're losing it. The radicals have lost it, and it looks like there's a major victory for Assad. He's staying, and that's a victory for him. But strategically and diplomatically, it looks like Russia is going to win as well. But I think the big losers are the people who supported Obama, Hillary's State Department and the neocons, and he may have not had it deep in his gut to do this. Some people hoped that he was more for peace. But anyway, it was his war. He got us in and said that Assad had to go. Well, it looks like Assad isn't going anywhere, and it looks like he's going to be in better shape. But the recent news that got out this week was the story and some pictures of people returning. Yeah. Not 100 or 200 or 300. 600,000 have returned, and they seem to be doing quite well. And guess what? They're putting all their trust in the Assad regime, the Assad government, to protect them. So I guess maybe they weren't quite as victimized by Assad that the other people made it up to be. But anyway, they're going back in. There's still a lot more to come, but I think this is very, very interesting and is a positive thing. But it does raise questions, we'll get into this later, on what is our policy going to be now? We didn't send ground troops in there, but we sure had a lot to say about it. So I'd like to see a reversal of all the policy. But right now, and they did give up trying to militarily overthrow Assad and take on the Russian army. But I think overall this is good. It was never intended to be of any benefit to Iran, but it looks like they didn't lose. They held their own, and they're no worse off for it. So sometimes the policies, these neocon strategies, don't work out as they think they will, and I think that is the case here.
Well, the big losers, you have to say, are the Syrian people. They've been victimized for 7 years, almost to the day, as I think you pointed out when we were talking, when Obama said Assad must go and got the U.S. involved. So for 7 years, they've seen the country completely destroyed by outside forces, U.S., Saudi, and other funded groups coming in, destroying the country to take it over. So they're the first victims, of course. We're the victims because we were forced to pay for this aggressive foreign policy. I'll tell you who I wish the real victims were all of the so-called experts, the pro-regime change experts who said this is going to be a piece of cake, a cakewalk, like they said about Iraq. It's going to be fine. And they demonized the rest of us who said we should not be doing this. This is based on lies. They called us Assad apologists. But here's a little part from southwestern Syria, where the government has just retaken the last city. They don't look like they're too unhappy, Dr. Paul, to be returning home. They don't look like they're being victimized. And this is what these so-called experts don't want you to see. People are voting with their feet. People are happy to have al-Qaeda and ISIS out of their cities. Imagine that. They don't want to be having these guys in control anymore.
Well, it's almost an anniversary because it was August of 2011 when Obama made the declaration that we had to get involved and get rid of Assad. And we were strongly supported by Germany, France, and Great Britain. But there's still, 600,000 have returned. But right now, and this is part of Putin's shrewdness, he's coming out. He might even be a diplomat for all we know, because he seems to be winning on this. But he has actually been talking to the French and the Germans because they have a crisis over there. No matter how much they support, mass migration, the people are waking up and they're not too happy. And there's 1.7 million migrants around the world. So Putin's actually been talking to France and Germany about, you send us a little money and we're going to take them back. Send them back. Maybe they'll come back again, and maybe those crowds will be bigger. And I think that is pretty interesting, that this might help the EU deal with their problem. And of course, it'll be a feather in Putin's cap. But at the same time, maybe there's still a lot more Syrians that would like to go home.
Yeah, and who wouldn't want to go back to their home even if there's not much left of it? But yeah, the Europeans probably should pay in a way. I mean, they're the ones that signed on to this cockamamie scheme. But the 600,000, that you mentioned, that's only in the Deir ez-Zor province. And that was liberated about 10 months ago, last September. So just in that one area, you've seen 600,000 return. A few months ago, we had a show where we talked about in Aleppo, the UN itself admitted that I think about 300,000 other people returned. So you're seeing hundreds of thousands of people returning once ISIS and al-Qaeda are kicked out, once the U.S.-backed rebels lose control of these places. So it's extremely dramatic development.
No, I think that most of what we see now is positive. But I now think about, what are we going to do? Are we going to pack up our bags and leave? Well, we didn't have massive ground troops, but we are going to change it. And the one thing though is that in spite of our policies, it looks like ISIS took a beating. They've really lost it, and they're practically in one city now, and they're probably going to leave or get beaten, militarily. But that was not because we went there with the pretense that, well, we have to go after the terrorists. We just aligned ourselves with a faction of al-Qaeda so they would help us get rid of Assad. But that hasn't worked, and it didn't work. And now the whole process is that, and the determination is, what are we going to do? Well, first off, I don't think that we're going to bring all our special forces home. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to bring our CIA home. Unfortunately, I don't think we've even has mentioned the fact that we won't have a base in Syria. Yeah. Matter of fact, we have said the opposite. Well, we're going to have to work this out, but we need a base. We need a base in Syria. Always hoping that they'll get the pipeline, through there. There's always that. But there's a lot of things that could happen. I'm afraid that one thing we'll probably do is offer money, for rebuilding. I don't think we should send them any money over there. We should just get out of the way and leave it alone. But we have this obsession that we have to stay in charge, and of course, we went in and lost so much in Iraq. They become our government, but it's not our government because we can't control them, but they still consume a lot of money from us. So I imagine the budget that they're working on right now in Washington has money that will deal with or permit, mischief in Syria.
And you say that they probably won't go out. You're probably right, but the thing is, President Trump can pull these troops out of Syria. He can declare victory. As I said the other day, he can call it Obama's dumb war, stupid regime change. We're going to be smart and pull out. But here's something else interesting about the experts. Remember they claimed when Aleppo was when the Assad takes over Aleppo, he's going to massively slaughter people. The opposite happened. People came home. Same thing in Ghouta. Oh my gosh, we got to do something. He's going to take this area back. He's going to slaughter people. In fact, people started rushing in as soon as he took over. Now, the same thing has happened in southwestern Syria. It's essentially gone not with a bang, but a whimper. The Syrians didn't go into occupied Golan Heights. They didn't provoke the Israelis. They simply cleared out the ISIS and al-Qaeda. And there was a dramatic video. We don't have it here, but I looked at it yesterday. Some 200 ISIS fighters at the end. In the last stronghold, they just gave up and said, we're out of here. And there's pictures of them going onto the bus with cameras. Interesting, a lot of these fighters are foreign. They're not Syrians at all. But everything they claimed that would happen hasn't happened. It's been the opposite.
When Obama participated in this nuclear accord with Iran, he also gave some of the money back that we had confiscated. But he got a bum rap on that.
Yeah, he did.
He said, oh, if the taxpayers are paying for this, but we took all this money from them. But we've also already, over these years, we put sanctions on Syria, and we've taken money from them. We've frozen their asset. Yeah. Because if we get serious and Trump, wants to work in a more positive way, he should talk about that. Get rid of the sanctions. Return their money. And instead of saying, let's send them foreign aid, then we can control how they spend their money and have condition. So I would think that we ought to have a clean slate. We should quit sending them money, that we should return the money that we took from them, get rid of the sanctions. Now that would be a real powerful move toward peace and development. Would help the Syrians develop their country. They still have to work out exactly what the Kurds are going to be doing, and also whether the Iranians will actually leave. But Putin's working on, he thinks he has a deal going where the Iranians will move away from the Golan Heights, and that, of course, would satisfy Israel.
Yeah.
But whether Putin said, well, this is what we can do, and Israel, hopefully they're happy. I don't know if I can get rid of every single Iranian from the rest of the territory, but I tell you what, he's moving in the right direction.
Yeah, that's true. And the other thing about Trump doing that is it's politically smart. He's pretty politically conscious. He doesn't like what the Democrats are doing to him, certainly over this phony Russiagate thing. He can just say simply, this is Obama's mess. We're getting out of it. Yeah. He lost this war, not me. I'm getting us out of his lost war. So it would make smart political sense for him, especially going into the midterms. Of course, the Republicans in Congress are too war happy to take it on board.
Yeah, but just recently, they're working on the military budget, DoD budget right now, and there's a prohibition, I think to some degrees, of us spending money in Yemen.
Yeah.
Well, that's very positive too. Now, I don't know what Trump's going to think about it, and we do know that just because there's something out there, even with an explicit prohibition, it tends to be that if they decide to do something, they can use the CIA and get funded by the drug war or something like that. So, but it still will be good if there's an explicit prohibition, but that still has to go through Congress. The neocons will have something to say in the Senate and probably, in the conference and this sort of thing.
Yeah, and another thing that I found interesting about how the Syrian government retook southwest Syria is they didn't go in and kill every opposition force, all the rebels. They basically took the non-ISIS and non-al-Qaeda rebels and they offered them, hey, if you want to go ahead and fight with us, you can attach yourselves to to the Syrian army and we'll go together and fight ISIS. And actually a lot of non-ISIS, non-al-Qaeda rebels did attach themselves to the Syrian army, and that is sort of probably a road toward reconciliation. And if that's the model when they go to Idlib of doing that, they may find a lot less bloodshed liberating that province than otherwise would be the case.
Right. I think that we should look at this as another positive to some degree, with our fingers crossed again. But I think the odds of all of a sudden this whole move toward toward a peaceful settlement in Syria, that's not going to be reversed. That's one of the places where I think Trump's been the least aggressive. It would be a bigger deal him shifting policy with Iran. He did shift in North Korea, yeah. But I don't think I think politically, and you mentioned the politics of it, if he was smart, he might do this. It's a perfect place to participate in it. But when push comes to shove, is how it's handled for the people who have a financial interest, the sanctions, the control of money, the control of pipelines, and all the things in a base, and what's going to happen afterwards. That's where the behind the scenes and the deep state get a lot of influence.
Absolutely, and you pointed out that Putin is the big winner in a way because he's shown for the first time since the end of the Cold War that he's able to stand behind his allies physically outside of Russian territory. But my final word would be, here's a message to Europe. You've got a big migration problem. You brought it on yourselves. Next time the neocons come knocking at your door saying, hey, we got a great idea. We want to do a regime change. We want to have a humanitarian intervention. We want to save a bunch of people from themselves. Slam that door in their face, and then you'll go a long way toward not having these problems again. And by the way, the thing that I mentioned about Facebook when we started, just to follow up on it, these are the things we will be discussing at our conference next month, August 18th in Washington, D.C. These are things that are at the top of the headlines. These are things that are critical for us getting our anti-war message out. We've got a lot of great speakers that are going to touch on these issues. RonPaulInstitute.org/conference. We have literally a handful of tickets left, and we want to see you there. Don't miss out. We will sell out.
Very good. And Daniel, I think that's very good advice for the EU. I don't know whether they're listening or not. I doubt it. We'll have a few listeners there that might hear about it. But you have to remember, and I'm sure you do, that we don't tell others what to do. That's right. But we are allowed to give a little bit of advice here and there. And I think that it was very good advice. But it wouldn't happen if we look to ourselves and our own policy. And not only can we advise them not to, encourage us to do bad things and get involved around the world. We need more people in this country, relating to their representatives in Washington and to the president, sending the message out, no more wars. We don't need this. We don't need pseudo wars. We don't need real wars. We don't need sanctions. We don't need foreign aid. all of these things that are sort of incestuous. It's there and we can't stop it, and so often is controlled behind the scenes. So that is why we have to deal with that. We deal with our government, we deal with the daily activities, but maybe it's just that some of the really big decisions are made outside of what we think is our government. Our government is there in appearance, but so often it isn't the real government when you look at how these things come about. But anyway, we still have our program, and we still can give an opinion, and hopefully we analyze it correctly and give good advice. And I can't see how you can go wrong if you're honest with oneself and give the advice and support a policy of non-intervention, minding our own business, let other people solve their problem. There's not many places where you can go wrong. We're not on the verge of being attacked. Nobody's going to put sanctions on us, attack us, or destroy our trade. And right now, though, we're vulnerable because we've overreached ourselves, and we know what happens to empires when it's overreached. It's also economically destructive, and our dollar is under attack and will continue to be under attack. So there's very good practical reasons for us to mind our own business and change our foreign policy. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report, and please come back soon.